Hi everybody, this is your tabla tutor, your tabla coach, your tabla mentor and tabla educator Varun Damle here. It gives me immense pleasure to present this episode on a very important aspect of tabla playing known as the Lehra. A Lehra is somebody, or a Lehra player is somebody who accompanies the tabla solo player either at home for his home riyaz or on stage with a particular mathematical or rag based composition which contains a lot of mathematics. For example, if it's a 16 beat teen tal, he plays a rag composition of 16 beats to give that mathematical support to the tabla player while on stage. A Lehra player is nothing but he is a version of the clock that we have. Everything is time bound. So likewise, even a tabla solo or a kathak performance or a vocal performance is bound by a particular time cycle which is known as the tal. The Lehra player gives that much needed time support to the tabla player when the tabla player is performing online on stage. So as you all know, ki tabla playing is a very disciplined art. I mean, not just tabla playing, but if you take music in general, kathak or a sitar player or sitar recital or a vocal recital, so everything is extremely streamlined and disciplined and has its own set of rules. So likewise, a tabla player needs the support of the lehra player on stage. Now when we talk about the stage performance, that's a different thing because you usually have a human as a lehra player playing the harmonium or the sitar or the sarangi to accompany the tabla player. But when it comes to your practice at home, you need to have a Lehra machine with you. Now, a Lehra machine could cost you anywhere between 4,500 to 5,000 or 5,500 depending on the quality and the brand that you invest in. There are few apps that are needed. For example, the Lehra Studio Ultimate or the Lehra Studio Pro apps that we'll be using in this episode to explain to you what is a Lehra, or how does a Lehra function and how to practice with the Lehra. So this is the main topic of today's episode, particularly in English for all my students who are there in the US and London. So how to play tabla with the lehra and how to practice it in the initial basic stage while you learn tabla. So now just let me switch on the lehra. The very first step when you get a lehra at home is that you need to recite the bowls with the lehra. If you directly start playing the tabla with the lehra, you are not going to get it right. You need to practice tabla by reciting the bowls on the lehra with the metronome that the lehra has. Now, this app doesn't have a metronome, but then you need to listen to the lehra and practice it. See, getting things right on the lehra is a big Herculean task. It's a very big task and it takes a lot of patience to practice things on the lehra, but you'll have to do it. You'll have to practice it every day for half an hour or 1 hour with the lehra, because tabla playing without the lehra is like driving a car which has no brakes. So you won't be able to control the speed of your playing if you practice it without a lehra. So a lehra is ideally not optional. You need a lehra. It's compulsory. Now we'll just switch on the lehra and we'll recite a particular bowl starting with the theka. So here you go. Dha, dhin, dhin, dha, dha, dhin, dhin, dha, dha, tin, tin, ta, ta, dhin, dhin, dha, dha, theka, dhin, dhin, dha, dha, dhin, dhin, dha, dha, tin, tin, ta, ta, dhin, dhin, dha. So what I would advise all the students is that first ensure that you recite the theka with the lehra for at least 10 times. See, there is no ground rule as to why 10 times. If you want to do it, you could do it for nearly 30, 50, 60 times till you get it right. But at least till you fit the basic lay of the lehra on the tabla and on the lehra, you need to practice it for at least 10 times during each sitting. So if you sit in the morning, then 10 times just the theka with the lehra, then the bowl likewise. Single line. Thai lay as it's called. तीट धा धा तीट धागे तिन्ना कीना ता तीट ता तीट धा धा तीट धाग धिन्ना कीना धा तीट धा तीट धा धा तीट धाग तिन्ना कीना ता तीट धा धा तीट धाग धिन्ना कीना धा तीट धा तीट धाग तिन्ना कीना ता तीट धा धा तीट धाग धिन्ना कीना धा तीट धाग तिन्ना कीना ता तीट धा तीट धाग तिन्ना कीना. Then after you practice the single lay for multiple times, say 10, 15, 30 times per day during one sitting, then you have to move on to the next lay, that is the double lay of it. So this is what is especially needed during the exams. Now the double lay. Dati Dati to that tit daga tinna kinna tati to tati to dada tit daga dinna kinna dati to dada tit daga tinna kinna tati to dada tit daga dinna kinna dati to dada tit daga tinna kinna tati to dada tit daga dinna dati to dada tit daga tinna kinna tati to dada tit daga dinna kinna dati to dada tit daga tinna kinna tati to dada tit daga dinna kinna dati to dada tit daga tinna kinna tati to dada tit daga dinna kinna dati to dada tit daga dinna kinna dati to dada tit daga dinna kinna tit daga dinna kinna dha tit daga dinna kinna dha tit daga dinna kinna dha. So this was just a glimpse of how you need to practice at home. This was just example of one qaida of dhatita. So all what you need to do is with the lehra at home, start with a simple qaida of dha tita tinna or dhatita tita dhaga tinna kina. Start with playing the theka 10-15 times with the nagma. Along with the nagma, check the lay. Don't let the nagma go one way and your recitation one way. It has to be together. You have to check for the beats, you have to check for the metronome. The tuck tuck sound is the metronome. So after you play the beats or the theka for 10-15 times, then move on to the single, like dha ti dha ti dhag tinna kina. And after you play the first bowl, all the four lines, then from the sum, that is the first beat, play the double dhatita dada tita daga tinna kina tatita dada tita daga tinna kina. So this is the basic pattern of how you need to play bowls. Of course there is the dedi, which we call it, which we won't discuss these complexities in this episode, but for you to understand the importance of lehra, this was enough. So the theka for 10, 15, 20 times with the nagma, then the same, keeping the same BPM, that is beats per minute, then you need to recite the same bowl, the single line dha ti for again for 10-15 times the first bowl, and then double the line. So I think this is enough for today's episode, and we'll move on to actually looking at the lehra and counting the beats and the bowls on it in the next episode. So this is Varun Damle here, signing off for today's episode of how to practice your bowls or the basic bowls on the nagma at home. Practice a lot, keep the practice going on, keep up the motivation, listen to a lot of great maestros, Ustad Zakir Hussain ji, Pandit Aditya Kalyanpur ji, all the maestros, Pandit Sopan Chaudhary ji.